And it says we're going live. Okay, we are now live broadcasting on YouTube for another Tech Talks. And we already have a pretty good crowd here, and I bet we'll get a few more just after the hour. For today, we have a special guest helping out with Tech Talks. We have Professor Stacy Kowtko. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did.
Oh, good. Okay. I always worry about that. Stacy was chatting with me about a month ago, and she was super excited about this new office hours policy that she has started using for her students. And it's a way of both kind of explaining what the office hours are for and also for her scheduling method. And she has been extremely pleased with it. And I was super excited when I heard about it. So we asked her to come on to Tech Talks and kind of talk about her process and how it's been working for her. So Stacy, I'm going to make you a co-host in case you want to share anything on your screen. Probably should have done that earlier. Okay, you can take it away, Stacy.
Thank you. This is my first time talking for Zoom instead of being in for a meeting.
Yeah.
Like Caleb said, I had been struggling with my office hour structure. In the before times, we had scheduled office hours and we'd sit in our office and we'd wait for people to show up. And if they didn't show up, okay, that's how it worked. And this is what honestly, what I'm telling you right now is what I explain to my students when they come in for the first meeting, which I'll talk about in just a second. And as all of you know, if we really wanted, there was really no free, robust access to have office hours online anyway, prior to the pandemic. Zoom had to step in to fill that void. Obviously, we all are living through that. And I had always had it in the back of my head, that I would love to meet with online students and at least be available like I am for my on-ground students. So I did things like I have a Google Voice number that I can text from. I use Facebook chat. I have a public profile on Facebook that I use that I add students to. So there were these live chat options, but there was none of this, obviously, for anybody anywhere. Then the pandemic hit, and once I got latched onto Zoom, I'm kind of a Zoomaholic. And once I got latched onto Zoom and its possibilities, I started scheduling office hours just like I always had. And sitting in front of a Zoom, did you know Zoom times out after 40 minutes if nobody shows up? I found that out pretty quickly. So I was holding these Zoom office hours and people weren't showing up, which honestly, my discipline is history, for those of you that don't know. And no offense to my discipline of history and all my history colleagues, but holding office hours for history is different than holding office hours for a hard science or for math or for people don't show up just to talk about history. People don't come in and go, I can't figure out this Holocaust thing. Help me, Stacey. It doesn't work that way. What people do come in and ask me questions about, though, and it generally tends to not be at the beginning of the quarter. You've assigned an annotated bibliography, Stacy. Where do I start with Chicago Turabian style? Or, I'm working with these Library of Congress primary sources online. And it's that kind of stuff that I end up talking with people about during office hours. So office hours at the beginning of the quarter, people aren't paying attention to in my class as much. And that was part of my challenge is I really want, especially in this age of pandemic and all that kind of stuff, I want people to know me, to reach out to me. And so I was struggling with how to make people come in. And in the before times, I had mandatory meet and greets in my office. And I would schedule these huge blocks of time and I would sit in my office and I would get work done if nobody showed up. But I told them, all my on-ground students have to come in for an on-ground meet and greet with me. And then I would explain to them in person, here's the point of office hours in a history class, and here's what you can utilize me for, and here's what you can ask me, blah, blah, blah. Pandemic changed that. And so I was sitting in a Zoom meeting for hours a day for the first 2.5 weeks with nobody showing up, even though I had made it mandatory. I don't make it mandatory in the first week. I don't expect me to find time to do that in the first week, much less everyone else. So I generally put it at 3 weeks into the quarter. You have to meet with me in my scheduled office hours before the end of this third week. nobody's looking at the third week due dates, the first week of class. So there were a bunch of obstacles to this process because I wasn't standing in front of them every day going, remember that mandatory meet and greet I told you about? Please come see me. So I started doing things a little bit different. I now have this mandatory meet and greet still through Zoom. I include it in my opening email. I send an opening email the day before class begins, giving them whatever I feel like they need to know about my class and the campus in general, and starting the quarter. And I include, there is an assignment due January 28th, that's what it's due this quarter, called NAB3. Go read it now, or something like that. And so that really helped this quarter. This is the first quarter I have fully utilized what I'm about to describe to you. So for the last 2 weeks and for the next week, I have all these scheduled office hours. I'm constantly advertising, saying, read NAB3, read the assignment instructions so that you know what to do with these office hours. And then when they come to the office hours, I'll, excuse me. When they come to the office hours, I'll explain to them, this is going to be a 5, maybe a 10-minute, conversation. I just want to make sure that you know how to access Zoom and that it's working on your computer. I want you to know that you never have to use video if you don't want to. I only need to be able to hear you because I'm always concerned about issues of equity and things. I met with someone 2 days ago from her car who chose not to turn off her video, who's living in her car. So I try to be as inclusive, that's the word I'm looking for, as inclusive as possible. And at the same time, nobody was showing up. And so that meant I was doing something wrong, or not necessarily doing something wrong, but not reaching them in the right way. So I started hearing it from the beginning. This is a mandatory assignment. You have to come in and meet with me. And when they do, this is what I tell them. Pretty much everything I just told you, plus. Once I finish the scheduled office hours, once NAB3 is due and everybody has met with me once mandatorily, I will no longer schedule office hours for the rest of the quarter. What I will be doing is, or what I ask students, what I tell them is, you email me at least 2 days and at least 2 times for each of those 2 days that you're free. And that when you want to meet with me, and I will pick one. So let's say you want to meet with me next Thursday at 2 or 3 o'clock, and if that doesn't work, Friday at 10 a.m. would work. I will pick one of those times, or I will pick one of my own if none of those times work for me. I explain that to them as well. And I'll schedule a Zoom meeting with them. The part where this comes in, or the part where the pop-up professor comes in, is every time I do that, I schedule 30 minutes to an hour of office time. I only agree to meet with one student when I can meet for at least 30 minutes or 1 hour, and then I advertise it to the whole class. And I call it Professor Pop-Up. The reason I'm doing this, my situation is different than everybody here in Zoom, and of course my situation is different than everybody in my classroom as well. But I am an empty nesting crazy cat lady who lives with no other human beings. So I have my schedule, my rhythm of life does not match my students, not by any stretch of the imagination. And my scheduled office hours are scheduled around my rhythm of life. And that was one of the things that I started thinking about last quarter. And I don't promise them the moon. I'm not like, just pick a time and I'll be there. I make it very clear, I need you to give me 2 or 3 times to choose from, and it's very possible I have to say no to those 3. But I'll give you an alternative that's similar, and we will make it work. And then what I do, like I said, is I schedule a half hour to it. I have never scheduled a half hour. I always do this when I can schedule at least an hour. And then I email all my classes and say, Professor Pop-Up time, I'm going to be in my Zoom office for an hour. If you're worried about this assignment, if you're whatever it is that people are worried about at that moment, I am here to come talk to. It's been really clunky. This is the second quarter I've done it. I am struggling. I'm checking my notes to make sure I catch all my points I wanted to make. I am struggling with the notification piece. I think I'm going to expand it into a text notification with Google Voice, because so many people are, even though I have everyone set up to where they get notified when they get an email from me in Canvas, texting is more intuitive and it's more immediate. And since I use the Google Voice anyway, I think I'm going to throw that in this quarter and see if that's too much for me or not. Because if it gets too complicated and too spun out of control, then my office hours are stressing me out more than they're helping me. I did have a conversation with one of our union VPs in consultation with Caleb. He was asking if this meets those master contract requirements for student availability, and it absolutely does. Because the language is in the master contract is worded so that student availability truly means student availability, whether it's scheduled or not, whether it's scheduled a day in advance or 2 hours in advance. It is still, I have this notification system. People can use it anytime they need to. They can message me with hours that they're available. And it seems, and so far, it seems to work. The piece that got me really excited that sent me, besides the notification piece that sent me over to Caleb to brainstorm some ideas, is the feedback I've been getting from students. And I know that one student's experience is allegorical. I completely understand that one student does not represent the thousands of students that we have on this campus. But to have one student tell me, I think it was yesterday or Monday during office hours, she is starting her fourth quarter right now. And that office hour meeting was the first time she had been offered that opportunity with any faculty that she had in a class. So she had been fully online. This is for 3 quarters. This is her fourth quarter. And my offer was the first offer she had to meet with the person through Zoom. And I realized that could just be the department she's taking things in, the courses that she's taking. I'm not saying that's a fault on our faculty necessarily. And her and I talked about that for a little bit, because I'm like, we're all struggling to find this new normal and have something that, I don't even like that phrase, the now times, the 4 times in the now times. And we're creating the now times as we go. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I have had so much enthusiastic feedback from students. I am going to get emotional because of the car meeting I had during that same office hour block. I have had students look me in the eye in Zoom and say, this was last quarter, I was thinking about quitting this quarter. And then I came in to see you. I had 2 students tell me that they were friends. They were like, we were going to quit. We couldn't get a hold of anybody for whatever reason, I'm not trying to lay blame or point fingers or anything like that. We're all going through such craziness. But, we have all these first generation students who don't even know how to navigate our system, that this face-to-face contact, just in my 60 students a quarter, seems to be making just a vast amount of difference. Yeah. And the constant, and to top it off, last quarter, there were several office hour blocks that I scheduled as pop-up office hours because the annotated bibliography was due. For those of you that work with those, everybody has questions about those. And I had 15 people stop in in an hour and a half. And I announced it an hour and a half before I started the office hours. And I had 15 out of 72 people last quarter drop in to ask questions. And it's those kind of experiences that are making me really look to solidify this process.
That's cool. So a couple of things come to my mind, Stacy, as I'm listening to this narrative here. One is something that I have heard from a student in, I think maybe last quarter, maybe it was the quarter before. A student said, I thought when the instructors said office hours in their syllabus, that was the time when they were doing office work and couldn't be disturbed. Like they got the complete opposite point from that syllabus statement as the instructor thought that they were giving. So when you talk about like first generation students, sometimes they just don't understand the hidden curriculum language that we are using, right? But when we, go ahead.
in a nod to our TLC, our Teaching and Learning Center, my NAB3, my office hours assignment, where you have to mandatorily come in and meet with me once, is tilted for that very reason. Yeah. I have the purpose, what they should expect, and you know what the successful criteria is that you leave understanding the purpose of office hours. It's a very simple statement.
Yeah, that's excellent. And then the other thing that kind of, what I'm thinking in my mind as you're saying this is, for the students, what's the difference, right, between knowing that office hours are scheduled at this time, but in this format, you're doing a couple things. One is you're telling them straight up, I will be here now. Now is a good time to come talk to me. So like you are explicitly telling them, no, I want you to come right now. And then I think there's also like a little bit of like exclusivity to it, right? It almost feels like scarcity. Like, oh boy, I didn't know that this was going to happen, and now there's office hours available. I'm going to go use it. So it's, I don't want to say it's tricky, but it almost is like making the students, giving them a sense of urgency that they wouldn't have otherwise, right?
And urgency and availability. Especially that one where I had like 15 or 16 people show up, just like one, and I have a waiting room set up, and I have a little automatic message they get when they come in, because it's not I mean, there's a whole, I am really playing with the structure because I want it to be functional, but I don't want people waiting in the waiting room for 20 minutes either, waiting to talk to me. And so there's a lot of conversation, but this means I'm emailing my students 3 or 4 times a week, which also helps keep them engaged in the course, you know, with new and evolving information. It really seems to inspire them to think of questions that they might not have thought of at all, is what it feels like. Like, oh, I didn't realize the annotated bibliography would create questions for somebody. I had somebody come in and say that. I didn't realize the annotated bibliography was going to have this many details. I'm so glad you offered this. I can't remember how it was worded. I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost like it sparks questions they didn't think they had.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing is, earlier you said, you know, I know one student is just an anecdote, but it's also, chances are very high that if one student has this question right now, you probably have 5 or 10 other students that have the same question at the same time, but are not asking it out loud. So again, this it's almost forcing them to engage with this question that is already in their head that they are unsure if they should ask. They're like, I don't know if I should bother her. I don't know if this is the right time. I don't know if I'm the only one. And now you're making it more of a community experience rather than just they're off in their own, by themselves in the sea, right?
And I haven't utilized it for this purpose yet. One of the expansions of this that I'm considering is topical pop-up professor office hours, where we talk about, I don't know, the January 6th insurrection. That could have been an anniversary talk where people could just come in and we could talk history with a historian kind of thing. That's a little bit outside of the office hours. I'm looking, you know, more at online engagement techniques at that point, but I think it's really going to be a useful expansion where I can put those topics out there. I can let them know an hour or 2 ahead of time, and the people who are available can come in.
Yeah.
Which I could record those as well, like you are with this one. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's a new idea I'll have to work on next week.
Yeah, so I mean, I really like this. It's a very simple tweak to what everybody's doing already, but it seems like it's saving you time because you're not sitting there in an empty office hour waiting for students that are never going to arrive. I think it's more accessible for students because now they are helping build that schedule in blocks of time that work for them. Because like you said, their life experience is not your life experience. We don't know what their job situation is like, their family, their housing situation. So anytime we can engage with that need that they have is always better for students. And it's just super low tech. You're not doing anything fancy. You're just rethinking the way this is organized and scheduled and getting student participation in it. And I love that.
And requiring them to come in once.
Yeah. I see a couple things popping up in chat. Angela shared what she says, her favorite office hours video for students. I will share that link in the YouTube chat later for anybody that is not here live.
I forgot about, I've seen that video. That's going to be in my NAB3 now. They can watch the video and then they have to come meet with me.
Cool. So I'll put that in the video, the link description on YouTube so people can watch that later. Jennifer says in the chat, I have weekly announcements where I address major concept issues to the whole class. Every time I add comments regarding questions from students. If I had a low Zoom office hours attendance, I still add comments that are often asked if and when they do show up. Yeah. So I think that, that's kind of similar in that you are, anytime one student has a question, you are extrapolating from that and saying, chances are the rest of you or a lot of you have the same question and are just afraid to ask it. So let's put this out here and have the conversation, which I think is great. And then Jared said, and you're signaling to them that you want to meet with them when it works for them. So again, this is not an imposition on you. It's not, your office hours aren't when you don't want to be disturbed. It's when you want them to come and talk to you and ask questions and engage with you. So I think that we got to make those things explicit because we can't assume that students already know what that means.
Oh, Jennifer, I do that in my class-wide emails all the time. When I know there's answers or I know there's questions people aren't asking, I send out class-wide emails saying, I've had a few students ask about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be this quarter. It might have been 3 quarters ago that question came up, but you know that they're thinking it. So yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to share, or Stacy, you have anything else that you want to make sure we cover before we run out of time?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. So if we have any questions, comments, any other office hour related ideas that people have been wondering about or experimenting with, now would be a great time to talk about them.
Hi, I echo to Jennifer and everybody's comments. Whenever I held my office hours, normally just 1 or 2 students are asking questions, and there were 6 or 7 students just sit there, just trying to listen to everybody's comments, and I normally just entertain. Wow, I think thank you for your support. So it's just like that's maybe I would behave like that. I'm shy, then I want to hear other people's opinion. Then we just share the comments, then take notes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I think part of that, Susan, is they just want to make sure they're not missing anything, right?
Yeah.
They may not be comfortable asking questions or sharing their ideas yet, but they want to make sure that they're on track with everybody else. Sometimes just giving them an opportunity to know that they're in the same boat with their classmates is really important, I think.
Yes, thank you.
I've also had, interestingly enough, reminded me of a clarification I had to make when I started doing this. I had several students who thought the opposite of the office hours block than what you were saying, Caleb, and thinking that every time I had office hours, they had to show up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I had several people that were like, so why am I here? And I'm like, no, I really meant it. You only had to come in once, but I hadn't really made it clear in the writing and I do try to keep in the back of my head that these students have 3 classes going on. And, if you've got me, A and P and English 101, or, me, Susan and Jennifer, there's like a million different rules and procedures and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to, through Tilt, because Tilt saves me every time now, get it all out there. So like you were saying, Jennifer, I'm answering the question before it's asked is the goal, but it can. I need to Tilt everything. It can save the world, Angela.
Absolutely. What does everybody think? Any other ideas or questions here? Anything that is making you maybe think about how you do your own office hours? Or maybe we just need some time to digest that. I think it's a really cool idea. Again, super simple, but just a way of reframing office hours to be more productive for you, more accessible for the students. And I just really like it.
I'm loving it. the smiles really fuel me when people, and then we start talking about weird random history stuff, or some book they were reading a review about, and it's a new reality that I'm enjoying.
Cool. Very cool.
Could you remind me, what is your preferred method for letting them know about the pop-ups?
Right now, the only consistent method I'm using is email through Canvas. I have it set up with my students. The first week I tell them the only way I message you is through Canvas, and the only way you should message me, like an email message, don't send it to my email, send it through the Canvas inbox, so that we do everything in Canvas.
Mhm.
So that's the only way I'm notifying right now, but I really, really, really think I want to set up the Google Voice text notification to give students the option, and that way I can email and Google Voice, and that's the only way. And I put it on the calendar,
Mhm.
but I don't tell them to look for it there. I tell
Yeah.
them to check their email, because I want them in their email, because that's how I communicate most frequently. So I'm just hammering home the email.
Another tool that some instructors use is a phone app called Remind. I don't know if anybody here uses Remind or has ever looked at it. It's very popular, especially with K-12 teachers, but it's also used by a lot of higher ed instructors. But it's basically kind of serves as a middleman between your phone number and your students' phone numbers, so that you don't have to share personal numbers with each other. You just share the Remind code, and then it puts you all in a group. And then within Remind, you can send them text messages. They can send you text messages, and it does go through your normal texting service. And I believe it's a free app. Like most of these things, they have tiers of service, right? So there's a free version and there's a premium version. I don't know what goes in the premium version, but that's one that a lot of people use because, again, like you said, Stacy, that's what most of your students are relying on for communications is text messages. That's how they talk to each other. It's how they talk to their parents. It's how their supervisor at work asks them to come in for an extra shift. A lot of times is through text messages. So, I say we should meet them where we're at whenever it makes sense.
I have several students this quarter who their entire interaction with their classes is through their phone.
Oh, really?
And the Canvas app. I have 3 students. I'm trying to help them get laptops with our emergency funding, because they don't even have a tablet. They just have their phones and the Canvas app, and that's not conducive to finishing a degree.
Ben says we might want to do tech talks just on Remind. That's not a bad idea. I'll put it on the list.
Sounds like phone accessibility as well.
Yeah,
on Canvas.
phone communication in general would be a good topic. So we'll put that on the list for a future session. Well, we're just about out of time, so I don't want to keep people past their lunch break if they have other meetings going on, but I'm not going anywhere right away if anybody wants to hang out and chat. Otherwise, I am going to close the YouTube channel meeting. So thanks everybody for attending. Stacy, thank you so much for sharing this. I really enjoyed this a lot. Hopefully this was interesting to other people as well. And we will see you all next week, right? What's the topic next week? Because it's one you're doing, right, Nick?
I always have to remind myself.
I think you're the one running it, so you better remind yourself.
Yeah, I gotta remind myself. We'll keep you all updated on what it is next week, because I can remember.
It's on the schedule in the e-learning newsletter. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, Stacy.
I'll hang out in case anybody